No, we did one
Second.
right after the election.
This is the pitch.
Okay.
Live. So, welcome everyone online and in person to episode 7 of Revisioning Democracy, Resisting Project 2025 and Ramp 2.0, as I'll say, a conversation with the New Republic journalist and author Nina Burley and podcast co-hosts Anne Christine Tedeschi and J.W. Walker of Stop the Coup 2025. My name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, which is the bookstore where we are podcasting from. The Bureau is an all-volunteer queer bookstore that has been in existence since 2012 and here at the LGBT Community Center since 2014. Our regular hours are Wednesdays through Sundays from 1 to 7 p.m. And then we often stay open later when we have events such as this. And if you would like to be on our email list, for those of you watching online, you can go to our website, bgsqd.com, and you can sign up for the newsletter, and you'll get an email every other Monday about our many upcoming events. So before I turn the stage over to Anne Christine and Jay, I wanted to read a land acknowledgement and a statement of solidarity with the people of Palestine. So the Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community Houses Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at mannahattafund.org. The Bureau also recognizes Palestinian liberation as a queer issue. As queer people, we know the pain of being cast out. We have been and continue to be despised by many, even by our own parents, families, and communities of origin. This reality evokes in many of us a deep empathy with others who are likewise seen not as fully human, but as problems to be solved, questions for which the answer is ultimately elimination and erasure. As we watch the ongoing genocide of Palestinians by the State of Israel, carried out with the full support of our government and funded by our tax dollars, we witness the inevitable results of defining a people solely as a threat to the safety and well-being of those deemed inherently worthy of life. This horror compels us to speak out not only against the current bombardment and siege of Gaza by the State of Israel, but against the historical and ongoing violent displacement of Palestinians by Zionists and the conditions of occupation and apartheid under which Palestinians have been forced to live for over 75 years. In our longing for a very different reality, we take inspiration from the words of Jose Esteban Munoz, who wrote, "Queerness is essentially about the rejection of a here and now and an insistence on potentiality or concrete possibility for another world." And that is from his 2009 book, Cruising Utopia, which we sell here at the Bureau. And now it is my pleasure to turn over the stage to Anne Christine Tedeschi and J.W. Walker. And hopefully Nina will be joining us very shortly.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks so much, Greg. So welcome everybody in the audience and also those of you who are going to be watching tonight live online or watching later. The first thing that we want to say is that we welcome you to, this is called Revisioning Democracy, and it has been the podcast of Stop the Coup 2025, which is a nonpartisan campaign that now has, I think we're now at over a year when we began. And we are going to be changing our podcast. And we're going to talk about that right here at the top before we invite Nina to join us. So how are you doing tonight, Jay?
I'm doing well, AC.
Red.
Surprisingly, yeah, I know. I've changed sides. I'm wearing, but now I'm wearing blue jeans, so it's okay. It's okay. I'm wearing pink, even better.
So we are going to, we want to talk a little bit about what's going to happen in this particular podcast. We're going to be looking, of course, at what we expect to happen on January 20th in 2025 with the new administration. And as we know, the implementation of Project 2025. But we ourselves are also been reflecting and making a change. And so one of the things we're going to talk about is that we're going to be revisioning our podcast. And next year we will be changing it to a Resisting Project 2025 podcast, focusing on the resistance. And we have also changed the name to some extent, or morphing our campaign, which has been Stop the Coup 2025. And we have a full website for those of you who are new to us. You can look at it. All the content will be there, but we will be shifting our focus on covering the unfolding agenda and the implementation of Project 2025 and the agenda by Trump 2.0. But we will be doing it in the context of how are people resisting, what is the organized resistance around this, and that is going to be our focus in the most immediate period of a couple of months right after the beginning of the new administration.
Yeah, and to that end, you can find our website at resistingproject2025.org. It takes you to the exact same place that Stop the Coup 2025 went to, but we figure that we should have a more current URL. So it's resistingproject2025.org.
And it remains a website in English, but we still do have multilingual capacity. So for now, those of you who are speaking in a couple of other languages can check it out and make sure to share it with those other folks. And we are continuing to put new materials on there. So make sure to check in as we do this. So tonight we're going to be talking with Nina Burley, and I don't know if she's back. Is she online yet here? Okay.
Nope, not yet.
Okay, so Nina will be coming on in a moment, and she and I have been talking. We talked for a couple of months before our podcast. I'm excited, but we want to talk about really what to expect. But I think before we lay out what is coming, just how are you feeling? What are you seeing in your community that you're dealing with, Jay, here in New York, in terms of responses to the election, and how are people feeling?
Well, it's interesting. As you know, I'm a part of one of the founding members of Rise and Resist, which is an activist organization that was started 8 years ago this month. Or 8 years ago last month, actually, in the aftermath of the 2016 election. And we've been going nonstop since then. So we held a town hall last week in place of our normal meeting. We've been meeting on Zoom since the beginning of the pandemic. We decided that this new reality requires that we start getting back together in person. That was the beginning of it. But then we also felt that there was a need for a really participatory town hall here in New York. And so we held one last week. About 75 people total came, which was encouraging. It was a lot of people who had been active in Rise and Resist and other parts of the resistance, say in 2016, 2017, 2018, but maybe had fallen away, as time went on, life, the pandemic, what have you. So it was good to get people back into a room. People did seem to be a little energized. I was a little concerned, to be honest. I'm going to be honest here. I didn't see a lot of new faces. That was a little troubling, but that may have also been bad promotion on our part. So we'll have to see how things pan out, because one of the big worries in dealing with Trump is that people's psyches have been worn down by, first by the 4 years of his first administration, and then by the 4 years of another unprecedented situation, right? Normally presidents, when they leave office, they leave the field. They you know what I mean? They go away. They maybe start a foundation and start doing some charity work, or they go and paint pictures like George W. Bush, whatever, but they stay out of politics. And we've, instead of having that period of relief from Trump, we instead had a 4-year campaign for president that he ran, along with all of his legal problems that we had to deal with. So now that he is, so now that he's back reelected after these 8 years, it's going to be interesting to see how engaged people are going to be on a street activist level. But we'll talk to Nina, who's just joined us, how that's going to affect the way that the rest of society
Yeah.
functions in a new Trump administration, how the press will function, how the media will function, how civil society will function. These are all things that we're going to have to look at, and some of them we're going to discuss with Nina. So I'm going to send it back to you, AC.
I'm gonna welcome Nina just a second, just to say that for myself, that I think I speak for a lot of people who are observing that a good number of people, of course, were some were shocked and very disappointed and are very concerned about what's coming. And I think that people are quite rightly, in many cases, taking a moment, wanting to really reflect on it, and to also make sure that if they're going to try to respond or resist, they need to think about what they're doing. And one reason for that is that we are in an unprecedented moment. This is not Trump 1.0. And we're going to talk tonight about the fact of, in many ways, our campaign has talked about how this is the beginning of what we might call US illiberalism. This is also the installation of what we would call a nascent Christian nationalist, certainly majority government at this point in terms of a new cabinet coming in. And the fact that we have Project 2025, which we've reported on as a blueprint of a conservative movement that is a Christian nationalist movement. And in many ways, what is being implemented now, as we see these last 3 weeks, is in fact a body of people, a core of Christian nationalists who have an intention to really remake America, rewrite the rules of our government, remake the government. And in many ways, we are in unknown territory, but we know what they are planning. So with that said, I wanted to welcome Nina Burley. Nina, I'm really glad you could join us tonight. Thank you. And I'm just going to read a little bio for those of you who are not familiar with Nina's work. She is a US journalist and a best-selling author, a documentary producer, really one of these multi-talented people. And she also writes a Substack, which is terrific, called American Freak Show, very much documenting the extremism that we're seeing now and coming, and has been covering the MAGA movement. And she's a contributing editor to the New Republic and a frequent contributor to the New York Times and New York Magazine. And in many other things, she's also been quite a publisher in both the Norwegian and the Italian press. Specifically, she's the author of 8 books. You've done a lot of things, Nina. I mean, you've got books about scientists in the 18th century Egypt. One of the things I think is important is also that she's written about the Trump women. And of course, some of whom are already being asked to join the new administration. And just a long list of articles. So I just urge you to go back also and look at this last year of work, because so much of her work has been really prescient in terms of what we're seeing now, what we can expect. And let's see what the other things I wanted to really talk about, because I thought is important, is her latest book is out. And I really want to urge you, of course, to pick it up and to buy it. It's called Zero Visibility Project. And I think that she's a terrific writer, very thoughtful, pissed off, angry, analytical. One thing also that I think is quite interesting, Nina, is that you define yourself and identify in some ways as a secular humanist. I think it's quite important to think about that in terms of how one analyzes the politics that are coming. And lastly, a strong feminist in covering women's rights. And obviously, the attack on gender, the war on gender is an essential part of what we're going to see here with the coming administration. They've made it very clear that the war on gender is a big piece of their vision of what I'm calling the klepto-theocracy, but we can talk about that. So with that said, Nina, I want to welcome you and also say that one of the things that you did and that we talked about before the election was that you were tasked by the New Republic to write what you thought might be a postmortem on the Trump 2.0 possible election. And in fact, Trump won. And so the article that you published, which is called Here Comes the Night, was kind of looking at what people were thinking might be coming. And this was done, a couple of weeks before. You talked to a bunch of different people. You and I spoke about what we expected. So what we wanted to do tonight is to talk about, here comes the night. What's it going to look like? And we also want to talk about what we can expect on the day one attacks, but also the 180-day playbook, which has remained secret, but we're starting to see. So first, let's talk about Here Comes the Night. When you were putting it together, what was your own feeling about what was maybe important to try to concentrate on? What were you trying to capture? And then how close do you think you did capture to what we're beginning to see now?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, and also for the work that you do, and this program that you've been putting on here, because it's been very helpful to me you know a lot of things that I think are really important to understand about how this is going to play out. And I really appreciated your program with the union leader for the federal employees. That was actually ended up being part of the article, because I hadn't even known that that man was available to speak, and so there was a lot in there. I caught the very end of that, caught up to that right before we published the story. So yeah, well, what you're talking about is, I've worked for these, paper magazines, legacy media for most of my career, and been in covered politics off and on in the United States for many years. And what we do is, or traditionally, you pre-write like an obit, you pre-write the election story and you write two versions, right? So in 2016, I was tasked with writing the Hillary wins, and my colleague Matt Cooper was the Trump wins. And in this case, I was tasked with the Trump wins pre-written piece, and somebody else was writing the other happier outcome. And so, I would say that I approached it with I always thought that he could win. I mean, I thought he could win in 2016 up until the very last minute. I thought he could win up till the Billy Bush tapes, I guess, and then I was sadly awakened to the fact that that kind of thing doesn't matter to American voters. And then in this case, I really did think that he could win. Towards the very end, again, I thought that Harris, I was down in Virginia, I was in Washington, I was talking to a lot of people who felt this like surge of she's going to win. And I was a bit surprised, although about 9 o'clock on election night, I went to sleep and I thought it's over, and it was. Thought maybe I'll wake up and be pleasantly surprised, and I wasn't. So the article was really, as you said, an attempt to game out based on what we knew, based on what other people knew, like you who've been studying the Project 2025 deeply. I mean, I have too, I've written about it, but gathering information from people who had really thought these things through. And, Congressman Huffman, who had created the Project 2025 task force in the House with House Democrats. We spoke. I spoke with the Mike Zamore at the ACLU and other lawyers and people who were, engaged in sort of looking at the specific aspects of Project 2025 and of what was going to happen. And so this article really was written in October, late October, and we didn't update it that much after the election. So what did we predict? What did the people that I spoke with predict? Well, first of all, we do see that some of those things are already happening. I guess the main takeaway was that they're not messing around. They're not going to mess around. This Project 2025 is it's a serious thing. It's not a drill, as Huffman said. This is real. It's really going to happen if he gets elected. And we talked about how on day one, they would attempt to do shock and awe. That most people thought that first day was going to be the day where the American people would, eyeballs would be popping out, because they would, the assumption was that he will immediately try to announce that he's going to fire everyone or reclassify all the federal employees into this political, and fireable, remove all their protections. That would happen in some kind of executive order, although there would be some pushback for that in the courts. That would be the first thing, one of the first things. Possibly what Romero at the ACLU has called sort of authoritarian theatrics on day one, where they are going to go and round up, do a very, very, immediately. He takes his hand off the Bible and they are out there going to round up, go to a factory, go to meat packing, something, and just take everyone out. and they don't.
Let's talk about the different parts of the attack. But I just want to say, like, having written this, do you feel, if you were able to look back, that you were tough enough about the attack, or do you feel like you were still wondering whether the attack was going to take place in terms of your own writing about it?
Well, I have to say that when you ask me how I feel about it, I have a problem with that because I do have a part of me that removes the feelings when I'm dealing with this stuff. I guess it's not, it's not dissociation. It's more just sort of a professional habit. I do not feel, I don't, I'm not writing and feeling, oh my God, this is my country, it's going to hell in a handbasket. I'm aware of that, but I don't have this strong, overwhelming. If I did, I would have some problems. But I will say that after I wrote the first draft of it, it was about 2 weeks before the election, I did feel a very sick and sinking feeling, and I left the country for 4 days. I went to Berlin. I had never been there. I had a cheap ticket. And so and it was good to get a palate cleansing escape. So I feel that that I predicted things as bad as they are. Well, I was about to say, so everyone thought these things were going to happen on day one, that shock and awe would happen when he took his hand off the Bible. But actually what's happening is it's already
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
It's a nonstop rolling shit show of scorn and insult and very deliberate. These nominations are meant to be to send a message to everyone who has ever trusted any part of the U.S. government. They're going to shred it. They're going to take down with the IRS. It's a mockery of any kind of norm and traditional governing. Now, obviously, all government, the U.S. government has never been, in my view, doing all the things that it ought to be doing, Democrats included. But what we're seeing here is the real, the dream come true of the cracking the administrative state.
Let me talk about it. I mean, I never like to assume that people who are watching it are all completely familiar with Project 2025. So just to say to people who are listening, may not be, the Project 2025 is a vision of the conservative movement, and it has a couple of pieces, but one of the main pieces, I would say, if we broke it down ourselves to think about, is, as you say, it is about changing the structure of the government and essentially giving a lot more authority to the executive branch. So it's the beginnings of what we would probably call authoritarianism or autocracy. The other piece is putting in a partisan government, and we're going to talk about the nominees. We're seeing that already, meaning people loyal to the president rather than to an office, getting rid of a lot of people who are in the federal workforce in order to put in a loyalist core of people who will then implement. And a couple of pieces in that implementation. One of them is to rewrite the rules of government, and it's very much to deregulate and take away the authority of the federal government, to privatize a lot, to give a lot more capacity to the private sector to come in and be able to do business and make money and not have as many controls that would protect the American public or protect consumers. And then the other piece of it that I think that we feel is so critical to talk about is it is advancing a vision of essentially realigning secular law and this traditional separation of church and state and putting in place an alignment with biblical doctrine. And that means a conservative, quote unquote, pro-life vision, which is anti-diversity, anti-woman, anti-gay, and other pieces of it, and really making sure that the laws and the regulations and the policies of the federal government are either eliminated or rewritten in such a way that they then reflect that agenda. And that is across all government. Project 2025 gives a blueprint for making these changes in 30 federal departments and agencies. And what we're seeing now in this last week or two is the nomination of the people who will be tasked to implement that agenda. So I want to talk about that, first of all, in terms of who some of the people are, Nina, and your thoughts about this. I mean, what we're seeing is that in many ways, Trump has taken the core people who were behind his campaign in this last year, or some of them. You have people like Susan Wiles, and you also have the architect Stephen Miller, who has been basically responsible for the extremely draconian immigration policies. But you also have people who really are the architects of Project 2025 as a policy coup, right? This is a plan. It's not the insurrection. It's not charging the Capitol. It's a coup of changing all the rules, right? And that means you have Russell Vogt, who has been put in charge of the Office of Management and Budget again. And you have also some of the other people. To me, the importance of that is that, you know, while Trump is choosing these people, we know that Trump isn't the one choosing most of these nominees. These are people who have been chosen by the people who helped put Trump in power. And that includes Leonard Leo, who is in many ways the dark money kingmaker behind him. It includes other people like Kevin Roberts at the head of the Heritage Foundation. And it includes some of these agencies that we're seeing that are really staffing the nominees. That's Stephen Miller's group, right? The America First Legal. We have the group that's with Linda McMahon, which is the America First Policy Institute. And then you have Votes Center for Renewing America. If you look at the nominees, I mean, you've got a good pull of people from those. And each of those groups also wrote a policy platform. So we kind of, it's not just Project 2025, but they really are closely aligned. So I wanted to kind of talk about, when we talk about this, let's talk about what to expect on day one, but also what is some of the resistance that is happening or maybe that you're seeing. And we were also very interested in thinking about it as journalists or as people covering this. What should we be reporting? What do we need to be telling the American people? What should we be requesting that even also the legacy media or the major media be doing? So we thought about sort of three things happening, right, in this first phase. One of them is the actual executive branch. I mean, we can talk about the nominees, but what do what is your view of the nominees? You obviously say they're an unqualified bunch, but really what you're saying, it's a shredding of any norms. What we have is people who are loyal above all to Trump. We have people who are either on Fox News or reality shows. That's a big part of the nominees. And we have billionaires. I think yesterday I counted 6, but maybe we're up to 7 billionaires who are really major donors to Trump, and who he's giving mostly ambassadorships and, saying, I'm going to do what I want. And the piece that I found to be not reported by the major media is the Christian nationalism. If you really look at it, a lot of these names, a lot of the key people are not just Catholics or activist Catholics. They're really staunch Christian nationalists. And if you look a little further, they're also Christian Zionists. So when you look at things like the policy on Israel or the Middle East. So I just wonder, first of all, how are you looking at, if you actually look at the nominees, are you having any surprises? What do you think about his choices? Your reflections on some of the nominees.
Well, first, just to back up for 1 second to clarify something, when I said that, this is the dream come true of the smashing of the administrative state. It's actually not smashing the administrative state. It is weaponizing it, and very specifically weaponizing. So what do I think about the nominees? Well, I think it's interesting that I don't think that all of those nominees are coming out of those 3 or 4 policy groups. I think they're coming off of his head. I don't think that those policy groups proposed Carrie Lake. I don't think that they've proposed Hegseth or
But
Chelsea.
If you look at his Christian nationalist bona fides, you might think
yes, maybe, but I don't think that those are people that they would have thought to put in there. I think he's found, especially with those, there's a group of men that are just, he has to have predators around him. So there are a lot of men, Hegseth, Gates. Who else? That's the type of man that he's comfortable with. Sending Kushner to France, Kushner's dad. I mean, the family stuff. I mean, it is, as you said, there's loyalty. Again, sending Kushner, giving Kimberly Guilfoyle a present to go to Greece so she doesn't talk about Donnie Jr.'s issues on the way out of that relationship.
Yes, the ambassadorships, but some of these other positions, a good number of these nominees were in this position under Trump 1.0.
Well, Vought was in position. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard certainly wasn't. Hegseth certainly wasn't. The Kash Patel thing is an outrage. Kash Patel is not somebody that you would have ever seen coming out of America First Policy, legal, or, you know, those guys weren't down with him. I mean, yes, he worked for Devin Nunes, but he's a lunatic. So,
Well, and the guy in Treasury, the guy that he just announced for Treasury, just seems like a completely bonkers.
and the IRS guy, yes. So, well, so what's interesting though is that he put in charge of the Wall Street. He did put these people, the serious ones, are in. You mentioned Treasury, but what's the other National Economic Advisor? No, Bessent, isn't he Treasury? Is that who they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't. He's the guy. He's he's a hedge funder.
Deregulation.
He's deregulated, but he's a standard issue. He's like Mnuchin, you know, these are guys that Wall Street can work.
Navarro, who wrote part of
he is not messing with that sector. He's
Money.
putting those people in who are serious and who are going to maintain the stock market and maintain the situation with the economy. That stuff is serious. The rest of it, you know, it's just craziness. And I don't think Hegseth and Gabbard and Kash Patel are coming out of any of those the brains of Leonard Leo or any of those people.
And I think they are, because if you look at Russell Bout, he's a Christian nationalist.
Yeah, but you could find Christian nationalists who weren't like accused of roofie raping, and you could find a Christian nationalist to put in front of your DNI that isn't known to the entire intelligence community as somebody who cozies up with the Russians. There are lots of Christian nationalists who aren't like that. So I think there's a lot of just coming off the top of his head. And, you know, like in Kennedy, I mean, we haven't even gotten to Kennedy, you know, Kennedy hasn't come out of any of those sectors, those groups that you're talking about. That's him paying back him paying back.
No, it's rewards. He's given
But
rewards.
also he's putting somebody in
back.
charge who's going to absolutely and utterly take down the FDA and take down the CDC. And he isn't an anti-choice. He is not the typical Republican HHS leader, because what the Republicans usually do with the HHS is they use that agency to police morality. It's always about the minute they come in, they put in instead of, you know, how a teenager can get to Planned Parenthood on their front page, they take that out right away and they put in, here's your religious liberty button, pharmacists, or, you know, cake makers who don't want to bake cakes for gay couples. Press this button and we'll send a lawyer out to rescue you.
Right.
That's what they
four health picks that are all. You have four health
but they're
picks that
not
are all
using it for that now.
anti-COVID, you know, right? I mean, the health picks are people who are anti-regulatory people. They want to take apart the power of the federal health agencies.
They're anti-public health
They're
policy.
anti-public
They're
health.
anti-national federal public health
And they are
policy.
very-
They want everything to go back to the states and the localities. They don't, just like with education, they want
Right.
everything to be handled by the locality. They want to get the federal government out, which is a long time Republican sort of thing, right? Drown it in the bathtub.
That's
whole
right.
thing. That's a long-standing sort of Republican idea about the federal government, but it's very much informed by the past 4 years, by the pandemic, and so that's the lens through which they're viewing public health, as they're viewing it about vaccines, and they're viewing it, you know, they're not so much solely viewing it like you said, Nina, through the lens of morality. It's really about COVID and vaccines and pandemics and how, you know, we're not going to force people to do something to their bodies unless it's forcing them to carry pregnancies to term.
I want to talk about the first piece of the attack, the day one. We talked about Schedule F a minute ago. I don't actually think that Schedule F myself will be necessarily implemented on day one. However, just for people who are listening, Schedule F is an executive order that Trump initiated in his first term, and it wasn't implemented for very long, but it was designed as an executive order to basically remove people who are in merit-based professional positions and putting them into a temporary situation where they essentially become almost like political appointees. They can be more easily fired. They lose their benefits. And in that case, what you could do is you could put somebody else in what's been called kind of a vacancy position. And so what Project 2025 has done is to say, we're going to come in with Schedule F, and we're going to, first of all, remove all the top Biden people. And then we're going to remove people from the heads of certain agencies. We're going to put people into acting positions. And so their goal was to recruit 20,000 loyalists. And they spent the year recruiting them, putting them to a training academy. They have those 20,000 people. Now, what we've seen is that the people who organized that plan, which is Russell Vought, as well as Paul Dans, who actually had to leave the Project 2025 because Trump was unhappy with how much negative attention it was drawing to him. I think that Dans actually is getting rehabilitated and probably will end up coming back in here. But Vought and also Paoletta, who was also involved in Project 2025, they're the ones tasked now. And so Vought has made it very clear he wants to weaponize Schedule F. So my question for you is this, you were talking to people, what sense did you get about Congress or when you're talking to Huff and stuff, their own ability or possibility of fighting back? Because for us, we know that there are petitions. We know that there's a demand, for example, that Schumer brings a vote for the Civil Service Act before the inauguration. We're not hearing too much about this. And so I'm wondering what you're hearing, if anything.
I am not hearing very much, and it's rather ominous to recognize that they are so gobsmacked. I mean, I think Huffman said to me, this is not a drill, and we're trying to make people understand this is not a drill. It's going to happen if he gets elected. And you see people like Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy saying, we are going to see them arrest Congress people. And these are things that people they can't even comprehend. I think they're just not responding to the emergency that we're in right now. Unless they have some secret plan that they're going to pull off before January 21st, I don't see the Democrats in Congress doing anything. The Republicans are completely lined up behind this guy. As you said, they made these future employees take the purity test, and the purity test includes saying, I believe he won 2020, and that's a lie. It's bullshit. It's a complete and utter lie. And that's what they're basing their firing of Wray on and everything else. They are completely down with it literally is the Orwell, you have to make somebody believe in a lie and say they believe in a lie. And the more outrageous the lie is, it's an authoritarian psychology, which you guys have talked about, that once you say you believe in the lie, then you're pure, then you can come into our club. That's the test. So they're all saying they believe in this big lie. So the Congress people are not acting. They're not jumping in. I'm sorry, I can go on and on about it, but I don't see them in any way prepared for this at all. I really think the sheepdogs have left the field.
And to that end, Nina, what are you seeing in terms of, well, you spoke about the legacy media earlier, in terms of, some call it legacy media, some like me call it corporate media, in reacting to, this new reality, the Project 2025, they suddenly written about, in the middle of this summer for a couple of weeks, and they kind of dropped it. I saw the Kristen Welker interview on Meet the Press with Trump. Project 2025 was not mentioned, which I thought was a serious problem with that interview. It seems as though there's an unwillingness to talk about, to examine this incoming administration. Through the lens of Project 2025. I'm just
Well, okay. So that part, there was a big part of my article is about the media. I talked to Matt Gertz, MMFA, and a couple things. So you do see people like the TV anchor heads, what's their names, Mika and Scarborough, immediately going down there and sucking up because it's not just that they need access. I mean, that's the thing that Washington always is about, playing the access game. If you're a White House correspondent, you need that access, especially the TV the big, the big TV media. And also I think the Times, like you have to be able to talk to those people. Otherwise you're not doing your job. I mean, people go after Maggie Haberman all the time, but they have to have a Maggie Haberman who can get them on the phone, right? It pisses me off when I see the left going after her because that's not her job. Her job is to tell you what is going on in there. Don't get mad at the messenger. Okay. So that's that. But what's going on is now two things. The power that the massive power that the American people have handed to this manifestly unfit person who's malignant is that he's going to use it to lean on the journalists through the owners. So the corporate media, corporations own all these companies, right? Big corporations. Disney owns, I guess it's ABC, right? Comcast, I think that whoever owns CNN, many of them are already Trumpers, the CEOs of those companies anyway. But what they're going to do is they're going to start going after the journalists, the journalism parts of those corporations. They're going to complain about them, or they're going to sue them, or they're going to go after them, somehow through the government apparatus. They're going to try to say that they're terrorists, right? They're going to rebrand us. And what is going to happen is they don't have to do that much because they just lean on the side, and the corporate side has a board of, stock. They want their stockholders want their money. And the piece of the company that is journalism is tiny compared to this giant company that makes, Disney movies. So they're not going to back the journalists up. Those big corporations aren't going to back them up. So you're already seeing Mika and Joe feel threatened. So they go down there and suck up to them, which, Tim Snyder, what's his term? Anticipatory obeisance. That's what's happening. So you see that kind of going on. And then you're
the
seeing
Washington Post and the LA Times before.
That was not good. But I think what you need to remember is that like a lot of work gets done. There's a lot of investigative work that's going on all the time. We all have string that we're pulling. We're all getting tips. We're all trying to find out, what kleptomania thing is going on over here, and how much are they spending, how much are they stealing over there? And what's happening is, as it did from the first administration on, from 16 on, the amount of corruption, the scale and the brazenness of it is overwhelming. And meanwhile, the journalists who are doing this work, they're smaller and smaller numbers of us. And it's really hard to keep track of it all. And that's part of the strategy. I mean, that's the throw shit at the wall Bannon strategy, which is if you have 5 erupting stories that you know about that every single one of them in normal times, if we ever get back to them, would have been a 5 or 6 week project of exposing, and you would have won a Pulitzer for it. But every day there are 5 things going on. So it's very difficult for people to keep track of. And you've got great journalists out there. You've got The Guardian, you've got, ProPublica, the Times they have, staff, they dig in all the time. They're digging in. I mean, yes, they're not perfect, but there is litigation terrorism that they're going to apply to people. They're going to apply it to individual journalists. They're going to apply it to, so you've got that going on. You've got Elon Musk who he's suing MMFA because he's pissed off that they pointed out that after he took down his safety, the ad, what do you call it? The safety moderators for Twitter, X, shitter, when he took them away, suddenly you had, ads from big companies right next to Nazi propaganda. And they pointed this out. And what did he do? He filed a lawsuit against them. And that lawsuit is alive right now. And they're going to try to take down those nonprofits doing that kind of thing.
I want to talk about that. you know, one of the things that we're doing is focusing on the resistance. And so since even before the election, I've been participating in what I think of as like the front line of the resistance in many ways, because this is very much a policy attack. This is very much an attempt to change the rules. And so I have actually been quite heartened to see, you know, I think at this point there's maybe 1,000. Before there were about 800 lawyers mostly, who had organized themselves in all the different sectors. You know, people have a very good idea and have known for months what's coming. And they've been learning from Trump 1.0. So, you know, I do feel that while it's not been made public, it's not being made public because they don't want to give it all away. So just to let you know, like we know, I follow this. And so I'm actually much more heartened to see that they're waiting for the day one stuff, but they're already ready with their day one response. And in some cases, they have preemptive litigation that they're also advancing.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens before the 19th.
That's true.
But I
That's
think
true.
that's really
ACLU had
important
it
for people
down.
to know.
They have a plan down to the minute.
Yeah, they have a plan.
Hour.
And then the other part of it, though, I think that we haven't talked about is, so for example, with Schedule F, you know, I think that some of the things you're talking about is like, they're going to go after the nonprofits. They're going to go after journalists. Yes, they are. At the same time, they've also been doing things like setting up large pro bono networks and putting money in to get people to have the kind of defenses that people are going to need to fight back. In other words, there's an awareness that this is totally serious and this is going to happen and we should be ready for it to happen almost right away. And what do we need to do therefore? So I think that it's good to know that people are not just sitting back waiting for the wave. They've been ready and they're bringing forward everything they know about what worked. And a lot of things did work under Trump 1.0. So we're going to talk about that too. But I just want to talk about one piece that we haven't talked about, which is it does involve journalists, but there is a blacklist out there, what we call a blacklist, right? It's McCarthyism. There's a group called the initials are AAF. They were given $1 million by the Kevin Roberts Group, a Heritage Foundation, and they've been drawing up a blacklist of people to go after. And they include, of course, people we've seen in the press, right? The Biden officials, it includes the Obamas, it includes maybe even Rosie O'Donnell, you know. It also includes people who are the heads of the specific agencies that they see were the ones who they felt went after or tried to punish Trump, right? By bringing lawsuits against his criminal activities or his alleged criminal activities. So that's the DOJ, the FBI, Homeland Security. We've seen these names in every department. They have names. We're not repeating them because we're not going to expose those people. But, you know, all those people are having to lawyer up, right? So that's already going on. But that also includes journalists. And so I've been interested to know, you know, of the people who, you know, maybe you've seen some of the people, the names of those journalists already being listed. What kind of conversations are they having about what, you know, how to fight back or what maybe lessons will we take? Because we did see some journalists get attacked by Trump 1.0. We did see some early attempts to censor journalists also. Just wondering if you're hearing anything or, you know, what should be happening? What kind of stories should we be writing about this?
Well, I'll be honest, I mean, in my circle of writing friends, I don't sense a, you know, I mean, there's some discussion of like, maybe we should be ready to, you know, I've got libel insurance now. I mean, I got that. I think, you know, I'm
in the conversation happening.
I'm independent, but I don't hear that conversation is happening in my circle. Other than, you know, are you thinking about trying to get a second passport, like this sort of half-hearted jokey, like, are we going to leave the country thing? Are we going to have to go? No, I don't see any really concrete activities, that you know, that where people, I think they're just trying to make sure that they're, you know, protected legally. But I don't really know what's going on inside the New York Times. I mean, I assume that those big companies have, you know, they've got their First Amendment lawyers out and they've got courts that they can take their cases to. But yeah, I mean, you know, it was the TV people that they really went after because it's all about, at least for him, it's all about the face, right? So he went after like Jim Acosta and Brian Karem, you know, people like that, where they just really, they're just so, he's so pissed off about the way he's portrayed on television. I guess he doesn't
bring forward names. I mean,
he doesn't read. So, you know, it's unless somebody tells him there's something in the news, he's not reading it. That we know. So that means that the minions, do they have like lists of, you know, journalists that they're going to go after? I don't know. I mean, I see that they went after ProPublica yesterday by name, Vance, because of the Hegseth West Point thing. And, you'll expect to see more of that. I mean, I teach journalism at NYU and I tell the students, I always ask them at the beginning of the semester, how can you tell the difference between fake news and real news? There's one single way that you can always tell. What is it? What is it? What do you think it is?
I mean, I was gonna be sarcastic and say if it pisses off Donald Trump.
So yes, that's not the answer. The answer is if it ever ran a correction.
Yeah.
If the outfit or the site ever ran a correction, then you know that it's not fake news. And what they do is if they ever run a correction, they leap on that. They seize on it as evidence that it's fake. Right. So CNN, and other companies they've fired producers that have made mistakes. And that is just something they will never let them forget. Well, you made a mistake, and that you never, ever see Fox News run a correction until they're sued for $750 million.
Well, Nina, one of the things that happened under some countries who have dealt with autocracy, and I always use Hungary as a kind of a good example because we are seeing a lot of the Orban playbook that is being put forward as, it was certainly put forward as a model for Project 2025 by Roberts. Orban is in there. You've got even nominees that are actually, like Gorka, who actually worked for Orban. So it's a very close association. But one of the things that happened there was that there was a pretty immediate suppression of the press, right? There was a consolidation. People were put in charge of the big media companies, and then eventually it really became a propaganda arm for Orban. But the other side of it is that independent journalists, who are journalists after all, and don't take it lying down, organize themselves. And so you began to see a lot of journalism. And one of the things you saw was, you mentioned it earlier, and that resonated was, really covering corruption, which we know is already a big piece of what's going to happen with this administration. So we do know that the follow the money story is important and it matters to everyone, including Wall Street. People don't like to see wholesale theft unless they're the ones doing it, maybe. But I just wonder, if
Well said.
if you're feeling, I mean, it doesn't sound like you're feeling any optimism, particularly in any direction right now, but I am, because I see what's happening in other countries. And so I'm very, I think that repression causes people to respond in many different ways. And so we might see some very vigorous new journalism forms or new collectives or others that emerge in order to really document this chapter of American liberalism. I'm just wondering, out of that also, just, if there are people who you're following, who you think are really important voices that you want to share with our audience.
Well, I do, I really spent a lot of time on Substack. I mean, I read the Times, I read the Wall Street Journal, just to see what's going on. And, but I read, Heather Cox Richardson, I read Steve Schmidt. I think that, there's some really good writers out there, and they're accessible, and they're paying attention, and they're putting things in context. Ruth Ben-Ghiat, Tim Snyder, obviously. But
these are people who write about fascism, they write about autocracy, they tend to put historical context in,
Heather especially, in Letters from an American. So, I read those things. I get a lot of information from them, but the original journalism is being done, The Guardian, ProPublica. I read Politico, I read Axios, even, these people, some of them have I read Puck, because some of those guys are they're in with the political people, and they are talking to people within the Trump administration. Now, you just said I don't sound very optimistic. I mean, there's a part of me that always is optimistic. I am, I've been quoting Antonio, the Gramsci famous quote, what is it? Pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the spirit, basically. When he was in jail, he wrote that, and I think that's my default mode always. I'm not fully 100% pessimistic, because I think the overreach that's going to happen here and the crackpot nature of what is going on with the appointees is going to lead to a lot of chaos and a lot of infighting once they get going. And I don't see that Susie Wiles is going to be able to keep it all under control. And I think it will be very chaotic. And I think that, people will break off from him. I mean, he's, unless he's just completely tamped down and other people are running the show, it's going to be very difficult he can't run an operation very well. So
One
I
of the
think
things
there's
that
gonna
people
be a lot
talk
of
about is that.
spectacle of the disaster of, there will be a spectacular, there will be spectacular disasters within, I mean, like personnel disasters going on.
I mean, we wanted to talk about some of the day one attacks about obviously immigration being one, the gender attacks and things. But before we do, I just want to talk about one piece. Some people have brought up that the United States doesn't have the same system as a system like Hungary. In other words, the model here is very different. We're really dealing with an extremely decentralized country. And that Project 2025 in many ways seeks to take a lot of the federal government's activities and functions and punt it to the states. And there we actually can see, even after the election, that, a lot of the states, even when Trump won, you have Democrats who won, you have governors. And the governors, for example, Democratic governors, blue state governors are mobilizing, all the attorney generals are mobilizing. And so some people say, he doesn't have 4 years, he's got 2 years to do this. I'm just wondering, in your own looking at this, if you've had any thoughts about that.
Yes, well, that's a big, so, Mike, the editor, really said, we don't want this story that you're doing to be 100% on, the horrible things that are going to happen. In fact, he only wanted like a third of it to be on that. So really a lot more of it is about what the pushback would be or could be or will be. And, you and I talked at length about that. Yes, one of the walls is the blue state walls, where, you've got the governors, they've got, I think 26 Democratic attorney generals. So they're going to mount a, resistance. The states, the cities, I mean, the major population centers that's where all the money is, first of all, for these other states. And they have some power, and they have power in their own court systems. And, so I think there's going to be there'll be that kind of resistance. You're absolutely right. There will be the blue state response. Now that, possibly they'll try to impound money and hold back federal funding and all that. But I think the states, are going to hold up, they're going to slow him down. They're going to slow this down. And as you said, it's 2 years before there is going to be another election, and the House, maybe the Senate can be returned if they do if they do enough outrageous things. The one thing we haven't spoken about is, and the one thing that is going to happen, or we thought would happen on day one, is the pardoning of the J6 militias, which basically is him setting up his own paramilitary answerable to him. And so you already see these paramilitaries. Yesterday, there was reporting saying they're offering them their services to help round up, to help round up those brown people that they want to round up. And so I think that that probably is going to be, it's going to be shocking to see that. And I think they're going to
there's going to be more pushback there too. I mean, I've even, listening to the lawyers about this, one of the things that people don't understand is that even if, for example, they seek to weaponize the National Guard, which is the plan, right? Let's talk about deportation right now, right? Yes, on day one, they're going to pass a no more birthplace citizenship. We know that. They are going to try to set up this process of weaponizing ICE in a certain way. And one of the ways they want to use it is by weaponizing the National Guard. But when you really look at the plan in terms of the law, unless they can actually pass the Alien Enemies Act, which is going to be very difficult for them because we are not, in fact, in a state of war. And legally, you can't exactly say that having a lot of people is an invasion in the context it was first developed. They are going to have trouble. And one of the pieces of trouble is that what National Guards are under the control of states. And what they do is under the control of states. So that's what I'm saying, like, while they have a plan and they'll be able to do a lot, and even things like deputizing your law enforcement or trying to deputize a private group, there are a lot of laws that come into play.
Right.
So not that they're not gonna do it, but there are breaks to put in. So I'm just saying, I agree with you, but it's important for us, and that's where I feel like for our reporting, we need to really tell the American people, like, this is what is planned, but also this is where you can speak out.
Here's
Governor,
where I'm gonna push back a little bit on you.
Yeah.
Okay, being here in New York, being a part of the New York Resistance, working with particularly a lot of organizations that are comprised of people of color in New York. What I've seen in terms of the New York Police Department's behavior toward immigrants, toward migrants, even though we're a sanctuary city, it's been extraordinarily violent and chaotic and mean-spirited in terms of the way that migrants have been treated. When they're sometimes just trying to sell, you know, some kind of food item on a subway platform or on the street just to make ends meet. Our law enforcement apparatus across this country is extraordinarily white supremacist to its core. That's basically why it was created, to create, you know, to protect the perquisites of rich white landowners against any sort of encroachment by everybody else. And so they get these, they pardon these J6 defendants, and then they can create, you know, they're already creating the thing with Elon Musk and I'm blanking on his name. Ramaswamy. That's like out, you know, that's outside of the government. They're like literally creating this thing outside of the government that's supposedly going to, you know, make the government more efficient. It would be very easy for them to create some sort of outside the government thing. Lord knows they have the money that's going to pay these J6 defendants after they've been pardoned to assist ICE or to assist local police forces.
Yeah, I think, you know,
to go after immigrants.
I agree with you on that, and I think that the expectation with the ACLU was they did bring up, Mike Zamora did bring up that concern that that you will see vigilante activity in some of those areas, because the red states, you know, that's where these people are operating, and they will be unleashed, just like, you know, this whole constitutional sheriff's movement. And, you know, so it'll be pockets of things going on in the country that are not, and as you said, like New York City, look what the NYPD is. So yes, unleashing that impulse in our society is certainly a part of the Trump you know, ethos and MAGA. It's MAGA, and that will be unleashed.
I don't disagree with the racism. I don't disagree with it. I'm just always trying to point out what is being done and what is being thought of, because these are things that they are prepared for. That's all. And so, for example, there's also, yes, that there is a Republican attorney. There's also a Democratic sheriff's network that is mobilizing, knowing exactly what is planned.
Yeah.
And looking at deputizing. So just to say that when people are listening to this, to understand that there are people who are progressive or standing on the side of law that are trying to see what is possible within our systems of laws locally, and sometimes even local laws, ironically or oddly, can trump someone coming in and making a change, even when you have like a federal property in a state place. So I'm just saying that there's, I think unfortunately a lot of this is litigious. I do want to turn to our questions. We have an audience here, but just to say one thing, which is in terms of always wanting to think about what people can do. One of the things we're doing is on our website is we're putting actions that people can take. When we say actions, they're mostly steps. There's a lot of petition actions. So, but we're seeing, for example, in deportation, we're seeing the lessons of, what happened under Trump 1.0 is that in every community, people began to mobilize. They formed deportation defense committees. And so I just want to tell people who are listening, their immigration groups are very organized. They learned a lot under Trump 1.0, and they have these resources to share. So if you're trying to figure out what to do in your own neighborhood or what to do, start by the issues you might care about, like an issue like immigration or temporary protected status or helping dreamers. And you can see that there are actions to take. But one action I think is important is to ask your local or your municipal or your state or your government representatives what they are going to do. Since you know what's going to happen, what is their position? And so we're talking about this, for example, with Mayor Adams. We know the plan. The plan is right now they're going to try to take federal properties that they run and they're going to take people out of there now and say, you leave, we're gonna close these down because people really should find other housing. And then they're gonna bring in the new people that they want to deport. So what is Mayor Adams' position? Where we have a city council, we have state, so these are the kind of ways in which we as citizens can get engaged and involved. But I think it's really important for us as journalists also to make that visible, like what can be done, what is being done. And again, Trump 1.0, there were a lot of lessons, a lot more lessons that I thought when I began to report on this about 2 months ago. So I see the problem is that most people don't have any idea what they can do. And we're not hearing much about it. We don't have any public information campaigns. We don't have any, I don't know where the Biden-Harris campaigns are in terms of putting out public information on this.
But that's because we
on.
don't know what they're going to do yet.
Yeah. And
We
you know,
literally don't know. I mean, I heard
Yeah.
today a rumor that they're talking to the Dodgers about the stadium.
Excuse me?
Oh,
repeat
say
that?
that again about the Dodgers?
I heard a rumor that they're talking to, I don't know if it's the Dodgers, but that they're talking to some people in LA about the stadiums and other places. The
To use
stadium.
them-
But
to
what do you
use
think they're
them
gonna do
as
with stadiums?
detention camps.
Right.
To use the
Yes.
stadiums as detention.
Yes, they're
camps.
asking individuals who have large properties and they're giving the contracts to, of course,
Yes.
and they've already got a bunch of contracts out. So yes, they're
So-
going to
so
try
we
to. do
don't,
that.
so the problem is you can't do this like handbook thing until you know what they're doing, and they're holding it back. You don't really know what they're gonna do.
I think you can find out from them. There's enough people already who know how they're planning to do this. I think that we
Well-
just need to be doing the
Well,
reporting.
it's that the administration is reaching out to the stadium owners. The stadium owners haven't said yes yet, so you don't. know if
Exactly.
they're going to actually do that yet.
But I mean, in
Yeah.
general, what
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
talking
They're
about
looking
here is,
for it,
you
right?
need, I have, I know undocumented people in New York who are friends of mine, and I actually don't know what I can do for them. I literally don't know. I just said, if they come after you, you give me a call and I'll try to figure
Well,
something.
one thing is that there's a lot of information out there, so people actually can talk to them about what their rights are right now, depending on what kind of category of undocumented person they are. Obviously, there's a lot of steps people can take right now, not just in terms of documents, but other things. So we do urge people to go to, for example, Unidas is a very well-known large site. There's other ones, some of the main immigration activism. They really have clear information there on what you can do now. And also what you can do if you're worried about your neighbors or you want to know what to do. There's a lot to do that you can do now. I want to turn it out to our audience now that we have an audience here, Nina, for questions, and just kind of give people a chance to weigh in here. So we're going to do that. And also, if there's anything we haven't, I mean, there's so much we can cover. We want to talk deportation, gender, the attacks on reproductive health.
I have a time issue though. I can't stay on beyond.
No,
that.
we
So let's
can't
just
say much
So
longer.
I'm going to
than
take some
that.
questions.
Okay.
Any questions here for Nina?
Are there people in the room with you?
Yeah, there are people in the room.
I'm
with
so
us.
sorry that I'm not down there with you. I
It's-
had to do
it's
something
rare,
up
but
here.
Actually, this time we
Yeah,
actually got a few people
it's here.
showing.
Yeah.
Anybody, questions for Nina? Anybody first to start with? Don't be shy.
Questions, thoughts, concerns, worries?
Questions, thoughts, concerns.
No, it's okay. You don't have to. If you don't have one, you don't have one. Okay, all right. We'll go back to.
Yeah, okay. So Nina, what in terms of thinking about the issues around gender in particular? I've been interested because you've written a lot about women, you've written a lot about reproductive health. The attacks that we're seeing now are not new. It's been going to the states. We've been seeing the state abortion bans. We kind of know what's expected here. They're going to eventually try to go after, obviously, if they don't have to pass a ban on abortion, they're just going to try to give it to the states and hope that every state, essentially passes as strict an abortion ban as they can. And then they'll maybe go after mail order birth control things. But do you feel in terms of divorce again, we've learned a lot of lessons again of fighting this. I'm just wondering, again, the reporting on this, I think of it from a journalist perspective. What might be the stories that you feel we should be reporting on most importantly right now, in looking ahead and knowing what is coming?
In terms of the gender stuff?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've been paying attention to what's going on in the ban states. I've been trying to do some work down in Texas, regarding the issues of, travel, that they're forcing these onerous travels onto these women and girls who have no money, or, their husbands don't want them to have an abortion, or, they want a surgical abortion. They have to travel 11 hours each way to get to Albuquerque or Carbondale, Illinois. Those are the nearest clinics. And there's an atmosphere of fear in Texas where they, they're afraid to drive, even though they can't, Paxton and those people can't legally stop them or make it illegal. There's all this fear among people that it's because they're talking about it all the time. So it's, it's a problem. I mean, I know right now there's a dire need in those states for travel funds. Dire, because
Yeah, they
we,
have that. Yeah,
northern states, when Dobbs passed, we raised a bunch of money, millions, and sent it down there, and they've run out of it because the attention has turned to the elections. And I know my contacts down there, like, they can't get here. So most of them are taking the pill. And, the pill they can still get through the mail. There are ways that they're doing it, but they're going to try to crack down on that. And, I think.
I mean, have you, like, for example, I know that Inslee is a good example. Like, he has stockpiled enough, I think it's mifepristone, right, for 4 years of the Trump administration, along with two other governors.
Who has?
Inslee.
Who?
Governor Inslee.
Governor Inslee,
I don't know.
Jay Inslee, Washington State.
Washington State, blue state.
Oh, I didn't
The
know
blue
that.
state governors, thinking about
know
this,
that,
saying,
yeah.
what do we need to have for 4 years in case this disappears?
Well, good.
Now-
I hope they're all doing that. I mean, I think.
Right, so it's like, again, we're not hearing much about it. That's, I think it's important. But in terms of journalism, I feel like, for me, I'm so solution oriented. I feel like we did learn a lot of lessons. And when I talk to people who are abortion activists or reproductive health activists, they talk to me about what they learned about how to operate on the ground, what they started to do, what they're doing. But part of the problem is that they don't want to tell people about it either. So it's more complicated when you're trying to report about something as it's going underground. But I do feel that as journalists, we have a responsibility to see what works, because a lot of things were learned. That is not a new issue. It's been going on. And we have a lot of, blue state, red state stuff that's happened. And we see that that's what the blue states are doing, but we're not hearing much about it in the reporting.
Yeah, no, I didn't know about that. I mean, I've focused, and I think your point is well taken. Absolutely, these things need to be, they need to be covered, and they need to be, I had a friend of mine who works at the ACLU in a different department from the public relations side, who said, I wish there was I wish we had some like writing that we could read, or a handbook that would have been put together by people who've lived through these types of eruptions in their nations, and what would they have done in the weeks before and the months before it happened? What do they wish they had done? And I thought that was a really interesting thing, and I haven't seen that. I mean, you maybe have, because you've done so much work over in Europe, but I think it is. You're right. I mean, I think those of us who are, I have some following on the Substack, and I think that, I've tried to push New York Magazine to do a little bit more of that stuff. Like, what does it mean? Are they actually going to try? Can they actually arrest congressmen? Are we going to see stuff like that happening? And like, what are the mechanisms that are going to be able to be pulled to stop that? So there is a lot of reporting that I think people are not doing. I think that it's there again, people are just gobsmacked with the, again, falling into this sort of magic trick that Trump manages to pull, of just flooding
so many things at once.
Yeah.
Questions, anybody here? Nina Burley is with us. An unusual event. Take advantage. Nina, the question is, what are you doing for self-care?
She went away to Europe.
Well, I did go away for a week before the election. Now my self-care, well, I like to, I take walks, I bike all the time. I have a dog, I go out in the woods. I'm at a party right now. It's Christmas.
I thought that was a pretty fancy outfit.
I'm dressed up because I'm going to go downstairs and have drinks. No, like I said, I do have this weird sort of, optimism of the spirit. And I think everyone needs to hold on to that. And also, dissociate, there is something to be said for dissociating from it a little bit, because, our lives are going to go on, and we have to do what we can for our people and our friends and our world, and be kind to each other. Be kind to people that we meet in New York City who need your help. I mean, if everybody's doing that, I think we'll get through it. I do. I honestly do. I think, I mean, I could be wrong. It could become some horrible, violent eruption, but I think that our system, at least, it's hard to imagine that it goes, the way of the dodo bird like that we won't have an election in 2 years, and if it is that we have an election in 2 years, hopefully the opposition, the Democrats and whoever else belongs in the opposition who stayed home is now going to be paying attention. It always happens that the midterms, flip. So, hopefully they'll have, been disgusting enough that there will be resistance, but I think we're in for a real show with these Republican senators just lining up behind this guy.
And I think a lot of people will get politicized, right? I mean, look what happened in the previous chapters of American history, but also in other countries. People get mobilized when the enemy
Absolutely.
is this
Absolutely.
organized and this threatening.
That
And
is very,
coalitions happened between people who weren't speaking.
look what happened in South America. I mean, we are not going down the road of Argentina and Chile in the 70s. One's hopes. It's impossible to imagine that. But those people came out of that, and that there are a lot of leftists running those countries, or have been, it's flipped. Now, of course, Argentina's in a different position now. But I mean, the pendulum swings. So
but if you've got Alex Jones is still doing InfoWars, let's talk about that for a second, because I read your Substack.
Oh, I was so angry. I'm sorry. I have to say that, that stuff does depress me. And especially if I'm reading it at 4 a.m, which is what I wrote about in the Substack. I look for I'm keeping the phone away from the bed. Last night I didn't have it with me. I did wake up and want to know what time it was, and I didn't go open the phone, because I opened the phone and then I see the news alert, and the news alert was, the Onion didn't get to keep news, whatever it's called news. InfoWars. They didn't get to keep InfoWars. It's going back to and the idea that, he can still be a functioning, operation, because the way the bankruptcy laws are written in this country, you can just get your friends to like buy up your thing and then you still have access to it. I didn't realize that was possible, but he still has access to, plus he has 400 or 500,000 people that will line up and watch him gloating on Twitter for a live stream. It's absolutely mind-boggling. It shouldn't be, because we know those are the people voted for Trump. They're not all Alex Jones fans, but that's the core element of just the MAGA world, and it's so obscene.
Can we get you in? Okay, well, I'm just gonna say she's still with us. Any other questions here for Nina? Greg?
No.
I think they're gobsmacked over there.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry if I was being so depressing, but yes, you keep the faith.
We all come from different perspectives. My perspective, I always tell people, is I grew up with a family coming from Haiti. I covered the elections in the early 80s up to 90s. I mean, the people who were under complete repression. You couldn't even mention the name of the dictator, or you could be killed. And
Yeah.
Extraordinary organizing, and I saw a country come back. Now Haiti, you could look at them today and say, well, look where they are today, but they were able to write a constitution after getting rid of the dictator. So I am very optimistic, not because I think we'll get rid of something in 2 years. I think we're going to have an enormous suffering, but because of what is possible out of that, the kind of creative resistance that I think is possible, and the organizing. If you look at Hungary, they're not yet rid of Orban, but they built a civic education and a rule of law, and all these things that happened under complete repression, without functioning media, having lost their Congress, and having a lot of political prisoners in jail. So things are possible. So I don't know what's possible here, but I do think that, because of the extremity of this moment, we're also going to see possibilities of things
I agree.
For America as a democracy that we haven't seen.
I agree. We're going to sign off on that note. Thank you so much.
Nina. Thank you so much for joining us.
You guys are doing great.
Nina Burley's book, once again, is called Zero Visibility Possible. Please pick it up and support her work.
Thank you.
Can see also her American Freak Show on Substack, and our own. Also, we have a Substack called Resisting Project 2025, where we're covering the resistance. So thank you so much, Nina.
Thank you, Nina.
And we
You're
appreciate
so
you.
welcome. Thank you, guys.
Bye. Oh, that was really